Hi, I'm Casey Watts. I'll do an intro. Let's do that. This is me blowing bubbles at a park. I hosted the bubble party in DC a lot. This is me playing bass drum dressed as a pirate at a dance event. I swing dance and I'm in a marching band. Like fun things about me.
Is that the Gem Cellar?
That's in New Haven, but I love the Gem Cellar too. I work at Heroku. I do front-end web development, or I used to. Lately I've been managing a team, which is really fun. I play colored instruments a lot. I just learned flute this year. The flute came first, and then my hair matched it. This is my nephew. I'm his adopted uncle. It's like a close friend, but I see him every week. I adore him. This is my trajectory in life. I grew up in Baltimore. These are 2 different points. I grew up in Baltimore. I lived in Connecticut for like 8 years, and now I'm back in DC, and I love DC. I picked it. I chose DC, and then I got a job working in Connecticut, actually, and then in San Francisco. I don't even work in DC, technically. By taxes, I do, but really, no. Right now, do you think I'm excited or nervous? I hope you think I'm excited, because I kind of am. I'm excited because I'm sure this will have a positive outcome. I'm sure you're all going to be receptive. I'm sure my content's good and polished. I'm going to present it well. I have high confidence that the outcome will be positive. If I didn't, then I'd probably be nervous instead, if I had a lot of uncertainty about the outcome. This is related to the 2 types of stress that you may have learned in like elementary school health class. Eustress is good, and distress is bad, like uncertain, certain, positive. Psychology term for this is I'm physiologically aroused. Unfortunately, the word aroused is loaded in social contexts. It's kind of funny. In psychology research, it is a really common term. It just means like it elevated something. So I'm elevated in my stress level maybe, but we don't know if it's positive or negative necessarily. But I know because it's a positive outcome I expect. Let's talk about you all. You might be tired. You've been sitting at your desk all day. You might be focused on lunch. You might be hangry. If you notice all these inputs, we'll come back to this kind of idea. This is a basis of the talk. Instead, you might redirect your conscious thoughts toward more positive things. You're curious about brains, which you probably expect to hear some about. You're excited about my talk. Maybe you just grabbed a coffee, so you're feeling that in your blood. It's pumping. You're feeling physiologically aroused if the coffee's having its effect on you the right way. Hopefully in the positive way. I've done some neurobiology research. I was a co-author on 3 papers about fear memory consolidation and reconsolidation in the lateral amygdala in mice, or about epigenetic effects. And that's not the topic of this talk. It's just kind of funny. Science is so specific. Even coworkers in the same department don't even know what I'm working on, even if I explain it to them 5 times. It's just so specific. This is the lateral amygdala, and we injected stuff into that part of the brain and saw the effect. And it had an effect, which was kind of cool and publishable. Today's talk is about these 3 big topics. One is about cognitive restructuring, and I'll explain that as we go. Psychological safety is the second, and inclusive culture is the third. Broadly speaking, it's about your own brain, and then it's about your team, collective, group things for the second 2. I have homework. You all have homework. That's in this document that I'm linking to, and Steve will send out later. This also has been recorded before at EmberConf. That's a pretty good recording, but that was only 25 minutes. Andrew, hi Andrew, is recording this one today, which is 45 minutes. Part C is new. Part C might be bumpy. I hope you'll excuse me. It's the first time I'm presenting it, but the content's solid. You ready for Part A? Cognitive restructuring. I'm going to go through first the opportunities when you might use this technique for context, and then I'll explain generally how the brain works in ways that relate to this, and then I'll tell you cognitive behavioral therapy techniques themselves. So it's like 1 and 2 separately, 2 different topics, and then we'll connect them with 3. By the way, I made this diagram in GraphViz, and I give workshops on that sometimes. I think you've probably already shared my tutorial with the company, or some people.
Of course.
You know this. It's a really fun tool. I love it. All right, starting on opportunities. This is my icon for downward spiral. This is when you have a negative experience. You might have a negative emotion and a negative automatic thought, and then they go together, and then you think about how awful it is, and you feel worse, and then worse, and then worse. Thoughts and emotions affecting each other. Some examples. 1, you might have an argument at work. You think you should be using Ember for your next front-end JavaScript project, but your coworker really wants to use React, and you have different thoughts and opinions, and might get heated, and you might get really upset with the other person. Maybe you're a parent and your child didn't close the front door again, and you snap at them. You're like, why didn't you close the door? Maybe you're kind of like I was a while ago when I was going to a meetup. I was hangry and wet. It was raining, and I was running late to this event, and I stepped in a puddle, and I was just, everything was awful. You have an opportunity in the moment that this is happening to you, and you also have an opportunity afterwards when you're reflecting and thinking about how it went. Both are like what I'm talking about here. Cool, so those are opportunities where you might use cognitive restructuring. Next, we'll talk through how the brain works. I've got 3 things to go through with you. Let's hit them. The inner versus outer brain, I'd like to illustrate with a cat gif. This poor cat. This cat was just eating food, and then they turned around and they saw a cucumber, which is horrifying to cats. I don't know why. Don't do this to your cat. This is really scary. So there are 2 moments this cat has where the cat sees the cucumber, is scared, jumps away, and then a moment later probably realizes it's not whatever they thought it was. This is illustrated by Ledoux's dual pathway, the inner versus outer brain. This dichotomy is much more useful to me than left versus right hemisphere. Those are pretty symmetrical and very similar, but inner versus outer are very different. Here's the inner brain. I drew a little black arrow here. It's just pointing a very short path. It's very fast. Feelings happen there. That's the part of my research, the lateral amygdala in the inner brain, about fear. Thoughts have to go through a much longer path. They go all around the outside of the brain. It's slower and it takes more time. So for the cat, the immediate one was, this might be a threat, and then the jump. That was the inner brain. And then the outer brain process happened much more slowly. Cool. So that's inner versus outer brain. That's related to everything we're talking about. Next up is brain as a system. As engineers, a lot of us have some amount of engineering background at least. This is the generic how a system works diagram. There's an input, there's an output, there's some process in the middle, and often there's a feedback loop. The canonical example that I learned in 8th grade engineering class was a thermostat. It gets an input of the temperature in the environment. It does some whatever electrical stuff, and then it spits out whether or not the heater should be on for a while. And then the feedback is the ambient temperature in the room changes, which becomes the input, and that's the feedback cycle for this. In our examples here, the process in the middle is your conscious brain. Your brain has a conscious and unconscious parts both. The conscious part is the process that we can really influence and control. What's the difference between humans and animals? Some people say humans have thought. Humans can really think about things. And animals maybe, we don't know. Some animals don't seem like they have much process going on, I guess. Some humans don't seem like either. When you're on autopilot, there's not much process actually happening. You're just going. So the left side, the autopilot or the animal, is responding to automatic thoughts and automatic feelings. And then if you're being more deliberate and mindful and that the process is actually engaged, the consciousness, that's deliberate. Whether they're automatic or deliberate, thoughts and feelings influence each other and can cause you to have a downward spiral. You can intercept the conscious ones. If you can make them conscious, you can really affect those. So overall, how do you intervene? That's the next section, CBT. Oh, I have one more model, though, before we get to that. Jonathan Haidt is a researcher who I like his work a lot. He has a model of the brain that is an elephant. It's kind of like inner versus outer brain, but another perspective of it. The rider is a person on top of the elephant, and the elephant is the larger part here, the stronger thing, the bigger influence on where you end up going. The elephant's really in charge here, the unconscious part of the mind. And the rider just has to say, oh, I'm going this way because I'm hungry. I need that food over there, or something. The rider has to come up with reasons why the elephant is moving the way it is so that it seems like a coherent group. It seems like they're in charge, and they know what they're doing, and they're reliable, and you can depend on them. So often you decide you want to do something, and then you rationalize it after the fact. Like your emotional part of the brain did the deciding for you, and you just come up with the reasons to explain to other people why you thought it. These are called post hoc rationalizations. Some people are good at it. You can actually get to the root cause of why you decided, and it's pretty believable to you and other people. Some people give reasons, or if you don't have time, like everybody probably does this, just give a bad reason. Oh, I was just hungry. Why did you walk into the room and walk out again? Oh, I had to go to the bathroom. It's not because I forgot what I was doing or something. Like, that happens a lot. It's not really useful to be like, you are post hoc rationalizing this. But to help them understand that there's probably more to it, that's kind of useful. All right, cognitive behavioral therapy. So some background first, and then we'll dig into how you do it to yourself. It was developed as a treatment for depression, and it also happens to treat almost every mental illness that was in my psychology textbook. It's like circling C on a math test. The answer was always CBT. Like, it helps so many things. In particular, it's as effective as antidepressant drugs for depression. So if you only have antidepressant drugs or you only have CBT, they're just as effective as each other. But if you have both, it's even more effective sooner, and that's like the best, and that's what doctors often end up doing. But it's very powerful. It's really, really good. I'm not trying to give you all therapy today, but I am trying to give you training. I like to rebrand this as cognitive behavioral training because it can help literally everybody. You don't have to have a mental illness for this to be beneficial for you. All right, if you're a developer, you probably want to install this. Just kidding, it's not real. This is a developer joke. If only. You want to help me make it? That'd be great. Yeah, it's brew. But it feels a lot like a debugging tool. If you can intercept your thoughts, you can really see what's going on, inspect the variables that are around, and change the flow of things. All right, so I'll give you this tool. It's in your brain, though. It looks like this. So this is the systems diagram, input, output, process, and then there's you have to get into the debugging breakpoint in the first place. That's the whoop. I'll go through these one at a time. All right, so the whoop step. Here you are having a downward spiral. You can't quite explain what you're doing or thinking. You can't post hoc rationalize very well. If you notice this, I encourage you to do this thing. Whoop! I got my mom to do this every time she was stressed or snapping at the kids or whatever. And she actually asked us to whoop at her, which I don't recommend you just do, but she asked us to do it. And every time we whooped her, she would enter the whoop state. This is your breakpoint. This is the debugger breakpoint. You can inspect everything and see what's going on. If you get to this state, first of all, congratulate yourself. This is a feat. This is like the first step of CBT. Most people don't even know how to do this, or like it's not worth it. You don't do it ever. But you'll have the techniques to deal with it appropriately now after this talk. You should feel like this. Success. It might even be weeks or months where you're just noticing and it's really frustrating. You're not affecting your actual thoughts and feelings directly yet, and that's okay. It's hard to be in that space, so the more you're in it, the more comfortable you get, the more you'll be able to affect your thoughts and feelings. All right, so now we're in this breakpoint. We can inspect some of the variables that are lying around. What inputs are there? There are lots of types of inputs into your consciousness. The first one that I think of is stimuli from the environment, like literally inputs from around, like something just happened, something's due, a situation changed, you got an email, someone said something to you. External stuff. Another kind is automatic thoughts and automatic emotions. These are not in your conscious brain. You didn't decide to think these thoughts or feel these feelings. They're just there. They're basically inputs into the small conscious part of your brain. Even though it's in your brain. This is like a core concept here. The conscious part is different than the unconscious part of the brain, and you can only control the one. Another category of thing is your current bodily state. I used a term earlier that reflects what your state might be. Hangry? Have you heard this term? I think this is super useful. I wish we had richer vocabulary like this. Sometimes I'm angry because I'm sleepy. Sometimes I'm angry because I'm hungry. Sometimes I'm angry because I've been talking to people all day and my social battery is completely drained. I'll define social battery later. So anyway, these are all types of inputs, external stimuli and internal automatic stimuli, and then just your state in general. And you can consider all these and which ones are making you think and feel the way you are. Some of them you can even influence, maybe now or maybe the next time. If you're upset because you're hungry, eating food might help, right? All right, so those are the inputs. Next up, we can think about the emotions in your head and processing those. We'll do emotions and then thoughts. One and then two. One tip I have is to expand your vocabulary. In first grade, my teacher, Miss Murray, told me, you can use Mickey Mouse words sometimes, like happy and sad, but if you can use richer vocabulary, that's much better. Try to say, here, happy. I feel excited. We said that one earlier, too. So richer vocabulary. To practice this, you might want to print this out even. That's linked to in the homework if you like. I also have 5 processing techniques to give you. 5 techniques for processing an emotional situation that you're in. Let's go through each of them. My favorite is talking with close friends. If you can talk with a close friend, they can even validate you. They can give you an external perspective, help you see thoughts you haven't seen before. And by putting it into words, it makes it a lot more tangible in your mind, and it's a lot easier to manipulate. If you don't have a close friend around, or if you're not ready to share these complex thoughts yet, you could talk to a rubber duck, like you might do with programming. This metaphor is in programming. It's you might have a rubber duck on your desk, and before you bother a coworker, you talk to the rubber duck. Say, "Okay, rubber duck, it's supposed to work, and it's not working." And then you imagine the rubber duck says, "Oh, did you try the obvious thing that you would try?" The rubber duck knows a lot. It's really helpful. It saves you from messaging a coworker. Another thing I do a lot is I'll type a message to a coworker, and I'll realize, oh, they're going to want to know this information. So let me get that. And then I'll add to it, and then I'll add to it, and then I won't even have to send it. I'll have figured it out just by getting all the details they were about to ask me. Journaling is another technique. This is writing it down instead of talking to a friend. You're kind of often writing to yourself, or you can imagine writing to a friend or coworker and then imagine the response, kind of like the rubber duck. My favorite way to journal, the place I journal, which is the lowest barrier, is easiest for me to get into, is a Gmail draft. Somehow that's quicker to open than a Google Doc or a new Atom page. So at least write somewhere. I think Google Docs is not a bad place, and then you can throw it out after, or you can save it. I've never looked back at journal entries. Most people that I know haven't. It's more about processing. That's the goal of journaling. Another technique for processing emotion is actually reading fiction. You probably thought to yourself at some point, nonfiction is useful. You get information. Fiction is not as useful, but it's fun at least. I don't know why I would read it, but I do, and it's good. I think the reason we read and enjoy fiction is because it gives you a view into someone else's mind. You can see the primary character and maybe even the other characters, what they're thinking, how they're interacting, and it's really helpful. You can learn a lot from reading fiction. It's really underrated. Another technique is meditation. This could be an entire talk, and I'm not giving that talk today. But when you're in a meditative state, a lot of your thoughts and feelings might emerge that you weren't conscious of before, so they enter the conscious part of your mind. That's useful. When they happen, it's easy to be upset with yourself because you're thinking such negative things. Or I suggest viewing them as data. These are inputs to your system, and then your conscious mind, you can be very proud as processing these as effectively as you're able. But these inputs are automatic. They're not really part of you. Don't tie your ego with them if you can help it. Try to not judge your own feelings in this way. That's the hardest part of meditation, because when you're meditating, you get all these thoughts that are kind of crummy. They just emerge, and that's stressful, and maybe you don't want to meditate after that. It takes a lot of practice to be comfortable in your own head. Whew, so this is processing emotions. Already, I hope you've learned a lot, right? Thoughts. This is the crux of CBT. If there's only one thing you get out of this, it's this chart of 10 maladaptive thought patterns, maladaptive cognitions, unhelpful thoughts. These are the 10 most common. Wikipedia has a nice page that I linked to in my notes that has like 30 of them if you want to go even deeper. But these are super common. I'll go through some with examples. And you should print this. I think I'm going to harass you to do that in a later slide too. So my story from earlier, I'm hangry, wet, it's raining, I'm late to the meetup, and I step in a puddle. And what do I feel and think? Oh, I hear myself, my automatic thought says, wet shoes are the worst. And then I counter that by thinking, oh, I'm kind of magnifying and catastrophizing this. They're not really the worst. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Casey, you can calm down? Can you calm down? And I was like, okay, you're right. You're right, Casey's logical part of the brain. I guess I can calm down a little. If I'm late, I just shouldn't go. It's not worth it showing up late. It's embarrassing. People will judge me. That's kind of all or nothing thinking. Yeah, I think a few apply to this. This is the one I picked out for it. So either you should go or you should not go. Going late is an unacceptable middle ground. It's easy to make it a binary. It doesn't need to be a binary. It's not even helpful. I should probably go. Today sucks. Oh my goodness, Casey, calm down. This is overgeneralizing. The entire day sucks. It's disqualifying the positive things that happened in the day. There were several I later remembered. And then it's also fortune telling that since it's been bad so far, really just in this moment, that the rest of the day will also be very bad. Instead, I could think more adaptive things. I could say, I am feeling frustrated. This isn't that satisfying to say, but it kind of diffuses me. It kind of stops my downward spiral, it stops it in its tracks. It might be a little frustrating because that downward spiral, as upsetting as it is, it might be satisfying. Like it's kind of weird. You can think that the hangriness will go away when I eat. That when I look forward to the pizza that was at the meetup. That made me feel a little better. And I'll feel great after I dry off. I gave myself permission when I get there to literally take my shoes and socks off because that would really improve my mood. And I don't think anyone's really going to judge me because their feet are also wet. They might be like, what a good idea. So print this. I encourage you to get really good at identifying these. I encourage you to get good at identifying them for yourself and only for friends when you're in the context of supporting each other and talking about it deeply. Don't just wield this at your coworkers. Maladaptive thinking. That's not helpful. You can really go overboard. Get permission before you whoop anyone. Cool. So you can get into the whoop state. You can process your types of inputs, all those different categories. You can process your emotions now. You can identify maladaptive thought patterns and stop them in the tracks and stop your downward spiral. And from all this, you can choose the most appropriate response that really meets your goals and makes you effective and happy. Whew. Good job, everyone. This takes practice. You can't just do it immediately. There are more tools if you want to get better at this. By far the best would be a therapist who specializes in CBT. If you don't think you qualify, most people I know have at least some level of social anxiety, which would at least cover the insurance for this training for you, if you're interested in that. Short of seeing a therapist, you could read a book. There are some studies that reading this book in particular has the same effect as seeing a therapist in some cohort study they did, and I read it and it's pretty good. It's very gripping. There are also 2 apps that I know of. Headspace is about meditation. And it's pretty good at like small lessons and getting you onboarded. And then Joyable is a web app that is specifically about social anxiety, CBT. That's the only one I've found for CBT so far. I think it's because social anxiety is like more focused. It's easier to have examples for just that than in general, everything. All right, you might be wondering, why doesn't everyone already do this? Everyone I know should probably be doing CBT. Why aren't they? I think there are some reasons. It takes time, it takes effort and energy, and it takes a skill that is not even taught in schools or anywhere. It's not a commonly taught skill. It's only if you have a severe problem and you go to see a therapist that you actually usually uncover this. But now you know about it. If this is useful for you, you can share with other friends and really improve their lives too. I've gotten an email from another conference I gave it at. A year later, someone said his relationship with his wife and kids improved drastically from this talk. And I'm just like, oh, that's awesome. That's so good. Maybe it'll happen to you too. Speaking of energy, this is a hypothesis or like a metaphor that I came up with, a social battery metaphor. Half of it's intuitive. You'll be like, yeah, of course. Some of it I'm exploring, and it's a hypothesis. And if you disagree, that's fine. Just like some ideas that might help you think about social interactions. So social battery, a battery can be drained and charged. It provides energy to something. We'll cover all that. Your social battery probably gets drained when you're around a lot of people, that, especially if you're not familiar with them, especially if it's high risk. Like maybe the worst is if you're going to a job fair and you're unemployed right now and everybody's evaluating how competent you are for a job and you're not even confident. You're like, oh, that's the worst. You can charge it by being alone before or after that event. Being alone generally charges the battery for everyone, I will assert. I'll get into introvert versus extrovert in a minute. It charges slowly. Like it's a slow charge. It's not a huge, impactful one. It is more likely to charge than drain if you're around fewer people and around more familiar people. So like a one-on-one with your best friend, that might charge you a ton. That's one of my favorite situations to be in. And if it's low risk, that helps too. I want to split the difference between social battery and social satisfaction. I think social satisfaction is more what we're getting at when we say introvert versus extrovert, because I think everybody has a social battery that does drain. Even the most extroverted person can't be around a lot of people in a high-risk situation that they don't know for indefinitely forever. They will get tired. There's an extreme. Their battery might be large and charge more easily, but it's still, that's its own phenomenon. But they probably need more social interaction to feel content, and introverted people don't need as much social interaction to feel content. I think that's the difference. They're related, but I think the difference is important. Oh, yeah, extrovert versus introvert. Yep. What does the battery charge? I think it charges this hologram of Leia. In my mind, it's a mental simulation of others. So right now I have in my mind an imagination. I'm imagining really each of you that I'm looking at, what you're probably thinking and how you're probably reacting. And there might be multiple possibilities. And if I'm really unsure what you're thinking, if I don't know you at all, if you're like poker face at me. I have to think about all the options. There might be like 8 options. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it, maybe you're tired. Blah, 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 blah. It's a lot to run all those possibilities for each of you. Fortunately, I've given this talk a lot, and I've gotten feedback from friends who've been in the audience, so I can imagine what's likely going through your head, that you like and don't like things I'm saying in different ways. I like looking at a friend in the audience. Like, I know Steve pretty well. So Steve is probably like, yeah, Casey, well said. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm doing well. If it were a complete room of strangers, I really don't know what they're thinking as well. So I think that's more stressful. I think it takes more battery. I suspect introvert versus extrovert. Introverts probably run... Oh, I have a slide for this. There's a general skill and a specific skill, and I think they're different. I think extroverts are probably better at this generally. They have more like refined mental simulation tools in their head than introverts, maybe, or at least sometimes some people. And then specific skill, if you're better at like a close friend than a distant friend. But anyway, this is a hypothesis. I haven't done any psychology research into this, but if it helps you, that's great. I also want to add that if your social battery is feeling drained, I wish in all of the environments that I'm in I could say, my social battery is empty, that's why I can't come to lunch today. And everyone would be like, oh yeah, I get it, moving on, it's fine. But it's kind of weird, you have to make an excuse, like, no, I'm very tired. Tired is a kind of a proxy, but it's different. Maybe I'm not sleepy. Maybe you can tell I'm wide awake, but I'm just socially drained. It's a different axis. I'm going to define some terms now. Anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, unease about an uncertain outcome. Anxiety has to do with uncertain outcome. So if you're certain about it, if you're certain it's positive especially, you're not going to feel that anxious. But if you're not sure, you have to really think about all of these possibilities, and that takes a lot of energy. And you're thinking about a lot of the negative ones probably, and that's stressful. Another layer is rumination. So that's this idea, but you're really focusing on the negative possible consequences, and you're not focusing so much on the solutions. That was really interesting to me when I saw this definition, that it was saying causes and consequences, like you're focusing on the negative but not the possible solutions or positive outcomes. I don't think I have a word that means just thinking about a problem for a long time. This one is really just about the negative aspects. Maybe meditation is closer. If you find a word, let me know. You might be asking yourself, this is great, I'll do this to myself for sure. How do I get other people to do it? Like that one teammate who's kind of awkward to work with? Well, you can influence other people. You can't make them do it, of course. You can apply this to yourself and then share your experience with it. I think that's really helpful. And you can also share these ideas with other people. Like, I actually have the book that I recommend like on my bookshelf. And if I think somebody will like it, I'm like, here you go. You can have it, it's fine. It's like $4 or $5 on Amazon, mass market paperback. Whew. Let me take a drink a second. Think if you have any questions on this section. All right, questions on your own brain before we move on to your team? Yes?
Do you think that CBT is more effective for extroverts or introverts?
I suspect introverts are often better at introspection and modeling other people, at least on average. So I think that they have the skills some amount more already, and extroverts may not introspect as much. Also, if you're not as worried about the negative outcomes, it's a lot easier to be gregarious. I think there might be some correlation there, but I haven't studied that. I don't know that for sure. It's a hypothesis I have. But a good question. I think, I imagine there have been studies on exactly that, and there probably isn't a correlation since I haven't heard of it. You can learn the skill. For sure, both categories of people can learn this skill and be good at it. Good question.
So rumination is the dwelling, in essence, on the potential outcomes of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is anything been identified for dwelling on the actual outcomes of a problem?
That's a word I want. If you find it, let me know. I'm glad you're thinking that too. You're with me. You're with me. We don't have the perfect vocabulary for all of these things, but I think it's partly why, as a society, we're not so good at these. I'm trying to give a lot of the terms that I have found and some that I've made up, and that's just one that's missing. Thank you. I guess introspection might be the closest, actually.
Hindsight.
Hindsight.
Something.
Yeah, hindsight, that sounds related.
Yeah. the inability to move on from it, right?
Yeah.
Is a huge problem.
Right. I suspect if you aren't able to move on from a problem, maybe you haven't found value in it, or you feel like you can still affect the situation some. And if you think about it enough and talk to people enough to settle that, to be sure you can do something and you can do it, or be sure you can't, then it's easier to accept. That's a good way to get over a problem. But it can be hard because you have to introspect so much, and all these negative thoughts and feelings are difficult to deal with. And maybe you're missing information from other people, and they're not talking to you, so you can't really have an accurate model of what they're thinking. Good point. Actually, I would like to add a slide about that to this later. Next part, psychological safety. If you've heard this term before, whether you can define it or not, raise your hand for me. Cool. So like a third of the room has heard the term before. By the end, everybody will have heard it, and maybe you'll even remember the definition. I'll define safe space, which is not what I'm talking about. A safe space is one where anybody would feel safe in this group with respect to their identity and like protected attributes and anything. And that's not what I'm talking about. A psych-safe group, psych-safe is my shortened version of psychological safety, that's that the current members feel safe. It's a much lower bar. A safe space is probably also psych-safe for the people in it, I hope. I think it might be a Venn diagram like this. But the goal is psych-safe. I think we can accomplish that. Psychological safety is a shared belief by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So you can say, you can offer a potential solution to a problem. You don't know if it's good or not yet, and nobody's going to be like, that was an awful idea, you should feel bad. That would be the worst.
Really the worst?
The worst. Thank you. What makes teams perform better? Google did research into this, and they came to this. The research of Amy Edmondson, the quote that I just had, was their outcome. They researched a ton of things that you might think affect it, like personality types. Certain personality types are better at working in groups. That didn't seem to correlate. Skills and backgrounds and the managers. But really the thing that seemed to correlate, was hard to pin down, was group norms. In particular, they fell into these two categories. My shorthand is communication and empathy. In the paper, it says conversational turn-taking and average social sensitivity. I think those are the measurable correlates of these. If the group is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, then that causes you to have a higher collective IQ. IQ is not the perfect measure, but I think this is clear. 6 out of 6 team members' voices being heard is smarter than 5 out of 6. If you're literally down a person, you're not as smart as a group. If the person is not comfortable sharing their potential solution because they're going to get made fun of for it, they're not going to contribute, you're not going to have that brain power. So I think we're on board. This sounds good. We want this in our teams. Hopefully we share a goal. We would like to improve psych safety in our teams. Yeah? I have 10 techniques to give you in 10 minutes. We're going to plow through these. Bam, 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 bam. Some about communication, some about empathy. Communication. This is one of my favorite psychology concepts. The earned dogmatism effect is the idea that since I'm very experienced, therefore my idea is right. You should definitely believe me. My viewpoint is the correct one. And you should be dogmatic on some things like basic math. 2 plus 2 is 4. Don't tell me 2 plus 2 is 5. I know it's 4. I'm very certain. Like, we have to be dogmatic on certain things. That's the extreme. But when it becomes more complex and amorphous, and it's harder to discuss it, that's when this gets in the way. And the way to cure this, the tincture for me, is to help the dogmatic person, the experienced person, understand they're missing information. And if they know they're missing information, they're going to be ready to figure out what that is and investigate it. So try to point out to them what it is that they're missing, or that they're missing something, and you can search for it together. It doesn't always work, of course, but it's sometimes been really helpful for me. Declaring unknowns is helpful for opening communication. Say, we don't fully understand this thing. Then everybody on the team can feel more comfortable investigating it or asking questions about it. That's helpful. Somehow this is skipped a lot. This might sound obvious. I see this happen most often in formal planning meetings where this is a question. Like you're about to do a project, this is a question. What don't we know yet? What are we unsure about? And then it actually gets hit. And if it's not there, sometimes we skip it. Framing things. If a mistake happens, like your code made production go down for an hour, that's kind of stressful. You can frame it either as a learning opportunity. We learned our infrastructure is not very robust and stable. We should improve it. Or you could frame it as bad, wrong, bad. I should feel bad. I should feel awful. What am I doing writing code, like a downward spiral? And you're guessing one is more useful than the other. If we can frame it as a learning opportunity, that's really helpful. So you should do that for yourself when you make mistakes. You should do that for your teammates when they make mistakes, for your manager when they make mistakes, and everywhere around. If this is a cultural norm that we frame things as learning opportunities, that's helpful. Acknowledge when you're wrong. Acknowledge fallibility. So tell everyone on your team, maybe right after this, tell everyone, I've made mistakes, and I will continue making some mistakes sometimes. I'll try not to, but it'll happen. And tell me what you notice if I'm ever wrong. Like, I know it. You don't have to pretend that I'm perfect. Especially for managers and more senior developers, this is really helpful. Everybody does make mistakes. You know it's true. Modeling curiosity is also super useful. Ask a lot of questions. If you're newer, ask questions to get yourself context. If you're more experienced, still ask questions. If you're a manager and you don't understand what's going on, ask questions. There's a limit, I guess. If you don't need to know how everything about every system at the company works. You don't need the full depth of everything. But I haven't seen anyone go overboard with that, being too curious. In general, you're allowed to ask that question you're thinking. Or at least, if it were a cultural norm in your group, that would be helpful. Cool, communication. Oh, that's what we just covered. Yeah. I think it's a good question. The question was, how much more important is it for managers to acknowledge fallibility than the regular employees? Yeah. I think it's important for everyone to do it, but I think managers are at risk to do it less because of their position. They have to seem like they know what's going on to have the authority, which is kind of silly. My favorite managers are the ones who know they don't know all the details about everything, and they're managing, they're not really doing the code. They obviously don't know the details of the code. Like in my company, that's how it works ideally. I just think they're at risk, which is why I bring it up. The impact is, as a group, everybody in the group is contributing to that cultural norm, and I think they're like equal members, everybody. Thank you. Next section is about empathy. Another one of my favorite psychology terms, propinquity. It means social closeness. So you have high propinquity with the person you live with, who you see a lot, like every day, several times. You have high propinquity with the person whose desk is next to yours. Less propinquity with the person on the other side of the office who you haven't seen in a week. Less with the neighbor who you've never met, even though they're physically close to you. You also have more propinquity with people who you're in Slack chat rooms with because you interact there. I'm in a room called Fluffy Chat at work, and so we have a lot of cute animals there, and everybody who's posting animals I feel a little closer to. They like my statuses. I have a mnemonic for this. This term is super useful. I'd like you to remember it if you can. My mnemonic is a song from a TV show. Propinquity in the brain, propinquity in the brain. There you go. Yeah. Propinquity. Everyone say propinquity? It's fun to say too. All right, next topic. Whenever you're communicating with anyone, there are two channels you're communicating on, whether you realize it or not. There's the task channel with the content of the message, and then there's the relationship channel. If you have high rapport with someone, if you trust them a lot, if they're a close teammate, the relationship is like implied positive generally, unless something bad happened. And so maybe you can not explicitly say anything there and it's okay. If it's someone you're meeting who's new or someone you've had a fight with before, the implied is actually negative and stressful, unless you like cushion it and say, no, you're fine, I respect you a lot, this is very good. And by the way, here's an idea. You can cushion it more. So these are both present all the time. If you give an idea, if you're sharing a thought with someone and they're not accepting it very readily, maybe the relationship channel is like tainted with something negative. And if you can address that directly, that could help. Next up is this acronym PEARLS. This is about communicating on that channel. This is like the emotional channel put into explicit terms. So it's an acronym, and I link you to the full thing, but we're just going to talk about one right now. Partnership, you can say, I bet we can figure this out together. We're on the same side. We have the same goal, you know. We really want to make the customer experience very good. You're like, yeah, we are. And then it puts you on the same side, the emotional content channel you're addressing directly. Empathy, acknowledgement, respect, legitimation, and support are more. And I'd love to go into these, but let's save time. This is your homework. Validation. You probably have used this word, and you probably think you know a good definition for it, but this might be slightly different. This is a really useful definition. Recognition, acceptance of another person's, all of those things, as understandable whether or not you agree. You can validate someone's viewpoint even if you completely disagree with them. So like if I believed X, Y, Z, I would also have your viewpoint. However, X, Y, Z, I don't know if that's true. Let's investigate that. And that it's really helpful for empathy. There are 6 levels of validation according to one psychology researcher. I love this framework. It goes from the most shallow, but it's still super useful, all the way down to the deepest one. So if your friend had a grandmother that just passed away, and yours just passed away too, you can relate to that really strongly. Radical genuineness. Like I can imagine how you feel very deeply. This just happened to me. I had this experience. I cried for weeks or whatever happened to you. That's really validating of their experience, that it's similar to yours. If you haven't had that happen and you can't imagine it, at least being next to them while they're upset is kind of comforting. Your presence is validating at a lower level. Another example I'll explain some of the middle ones with is a friend is afraid of dogs, and you're walking down the street and a dog comes out of the house and is barking. You can, I'll go through an example of each of these for that. Just be with them, and that helps a little. If they were alone, that would have been more scary. If you can reflect to them, you are afraid of that dog. That's a little better. Like you're acknowledging it at least better than just walking by. Accurate reflection is often they tell you how they're feeling and you reflect back. You are feeling stressed. That's the reflection part of that word. Mind reading is they didn't even tell you, but you're like, you're probably really stressed about that dog, aren't you? Because you're reading their body language or whatever. Based on their background, you actually do know this person was bit by a dog when they were 8 and had to go to the hospital and get stitches. So that's more validating. Like, of course you're afraid of dogs. A dog has bit you. Like, I would be too. And then the next one is anyone would. So everybody would be afraid of this dog who's horrifying and drooling and snarling. Anybody would be scared of. That's even better. That's actually surprising to me. I've tried both in different situations, and the anyone would is actually more powerful in my experience. Maybe both. Maybe a mix of both. Like acknowledging the thing you know about them, but really anyone would. It's not that they're being weird. Well, validation is really important to me. If there's ever a communication block, if we're not on the same page, validating the other person's viewpoint helps so much. It's ridiculous. Next idea, depersonalize ideas. This one's hard to get traction with everywhere I've been, but it's helpful when we do it at all. I have an idea for a project. We should use Ember. That's one of my favorite framework. I don't want everyone to say, well, if we do Casey's idea, then blah, 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 blah. Because if it's not an idea that we like or choose, then my ego is tied to that a little bit. I don't look as good, or I might not feel as good at least. So I like to say idea A, B, C, or describe them with a short description, something memorable hopefully. I don't always do this because it's really easy to just say someone's name for an idea. It's easy to slip into that. It's quicker, it's faster. But if there are higher stakes, it's more worth it to go with idea A, B, C, or if it's more critical if it's a bigger project. This is a technique to have in your pocket at least. Vulnerability is the idea that you share an experience that somebody could invalidate or disagree with, and it's like a risky move to do. And if you're validated, then you feel more trust with that person. There's a ton to read and videos to watch about this. Brene Brown is one person who's made some awesome videos that are really touching, and that's in the homework if you'd like. I'm not going to go into that anymore right now. So that's those 5. Whew. We covered those 10. Let me take another drink. That's part B. Questions on this part before we move on? Right. Part C. This is the new part. I wrote this last night and this morning. I've been thinking about it for months. I've been taking notes in a doc, but it's just starting to come together. Excuse me if it's a little bumpy. I'm probably going to point back and point forward a lot and be like, oh, I would reorder that later if I could. The goal of this is to make your team psychologically safe for everyone. So everyone on your team and anyone who would join your team. I'm going to cover all these topics. Some of these are kind of grouped together. It's like it's the HR perspective, diversity and inclusion, culture and like background things, terms that I'm going to be using a lot, some specific groups and how to work with them, and then some specific tips on speech patterns, how to identify which ones are useful or not useful, and some words for those. What I'm not covering is political things about inclusion. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to do it from the perspective, we would like everyone to be comfortable. We're on that same page. And then I'm only trying to address things that make people feel comfortable. And then legal things, I'm not trying to cover either. Your HR training probably covered that. Speaking of HR, diversity and inclusion is a term, it's pretty popular in the industry lately. It means we want to have a diverse set of employees in our company and on our teams, and we want them to feel included and part of it, both. It's easy to do one, but not the other. I think this has two parts to it. One is psychological safety, which is often implied because it's not so widely understood. And the other one is to be more fair in a macro sense, so that minorities can have places in companies and be productive and thrive in the macro sense. As I just said, I'm focusing on the psych safe part, but I think the other one's very important too. When you had HR training, they probably told you, don't do some awful things. Here's a scenario that's absurd that you should never do to your coworker. I think this perspective is useful, and the legal part is important, and we should know it, and that's not my focus. Who should drive diversity and inclusion initiatives in a company? HR? Yeah. Actually, yes, like they should, but like I said 5 times, it only goes so far. Should the minorities do it? They're the most incentivized to. So if they're interested, they should have the opportunity to be involved in these, but it's not fair to put all of the burden on them. They're already burdened by their minority status. We can't expect them to do all the work. Maybe management should do it. I'd say yes, management should play a part, management should support it and help it. But by far the greater number of people in the company who are able is the employees directly. So management employees can support these efforts. All right. Culture versus ethnicity. They're two different ideas. They're often related. A lot of people with a certain ethnicity have a certain culture, but sometimes they're not matched. Like if you are 100% German, you look very German according to the standard definition, but you were born in the US and you were born to American parents and your culture is American, completely American. It's not fair to see this person and assume that they're culturally German. And that's easy for our brains to do. They're wired in that way to take the shortcuts. We don't want to do that if we can help it. Often the one is visible and the one's invisible. Ethnicity is visible, you can tell directly, and culture is not visible. You can't tell what culture someone is on the inside from just seeing their outside. Some cultures are more homogeneous and some are more heterogeneous. So homogeneous is it's all one thing. Heterogeneous is there are several subparts of the thing. The US is pretty heterogeneous. We have a lot of cultures. We've been called the melting pot. And when people extend that metaphor further, it's kind of lumpy. It hasn't fully melted. We're not one coherent soup. My example of a homogeneous culture is Korea. Korean culture is so homogeneous, or trying to be. If you want to become a Korean citizen, you even have to pass a test, which covers a lot of Korean culture. That you have to pass cultural benchmarks in order to get into the country. And if someone says they're culturally Korean from Korea, you can probably assume several things about their culture, and it's accurate, and they're proud of it, and they know it, and it's different than ethnicity. Let me come back. Making assumptions. I think it's never polite to assume things based on ethnicity or appearance. That's rude. But sometimes it's okay to assume things based on culture. If you know somebody has a certain culture and you know things about the culture and you know they follow it strictly, it's not so taboo to talk about that. I think you're likely to be policed anyway because the ideas are conflated in the popular mindset, but I don't think it should be taboo. For example, someone Muslim on your team, and you know being Muslim is very important to them, and Ramadan is this month. I don't think it's rude to ask them if they celebrate Ramadan, assuming that they're all these assumptions. But if you say, do you celebrate Ramadan? Somebody in the room might be like, oh, you can't talk about that. I think culture and ethnicity are different, and I'd like to see our culture change in that way. Cool. I want to talk about this test. Have you taken the implicit association test? Raise your hand. Some of you have. If you haven't, you'll find it really interesting. So here's an example. So you see this picture of someone. You have to choose whether it's African American or European American. That's the test. and then there's another word next to it that's associated. People are quicker to associate good with European Americans. So if those are on the same side, it's quicker. This one would be slower. And it just, something subtle in your brain is making it harder to associate black people with positive things. That's one of the correlations. If you take this test, you will not be like completely unbiased. It's not possible. Nobody that's taken it, as far as I'm aware, has gotten like a perfect score. We all have biases. Here are some of the takeaways the studies had. Preference for white people over black people. White good, black bad is one association that's common. Preference for white over black. Strong, moderate, slight. So like it seems like most people have some amount. Even black people have the same association, which was very surprising to me. There are also these tests for like male versus female. Women are more associated with home, male more associated with work in like most people's minds. And that makes sense because it's like in the culture, it's in the movies you watch, the TV, it's just, even if you don't want it to be true, it kind of is true. I suggest you take this test. I think you'll learn a lot about yourself. You can take it here. Harvard has a website. They will use your data for research, I guess. Yeah, once you figure out your biases, what they are, you can try to start countering them some amount. It's hard, and if you accidentally do something biased, I have one. I was awful this week. I was in a meeting, and I needed someone to take notes, and I asked the only woman in the group to take notes, and I don't know why I did. It was probably because there's an association with women taking notes and being a secretary, and I should probably apologize to her for doing that and try not to do it again. There are other reasons why like she was a good candidate anyway, but I know that affected it a little bit, and I'm willing to own up to it. I think that's good for our relationship when I get to that, probably tomorrow. As a manager, I have like no free time. I have meeting all day long. It can be stressful. Cool, we covered that. When you're talking about someone's culture or ethnicity, if it comes up, don't go overboard and ask them about it too much. Try not to even bring it up if you can, help it. Talking about your own culture, if you stand out, is exhausting. If it's the only topic you have with every single coworker all the time, it's too much. It's polite to be some amount curious, but not to the exclusion of the normal topics you would talk to them about. Try those first. Cool. Origin versus ethnicity. There's a really common taboo, and that's asking someone, where are you from? And they'll say, oh, Chicago. No, where are you really from? And then you're trying to ask what's their ethnicity. I think what you're trying to get at if you ask that question is your cultural background totally American? Should I make this set of assumptions about you? Or is it totally Korean? And I should assume more Korean culture, or is it a mix? And that's still rude. You can't get away with asking that, but that would be useful if you knew their cultural background. But the goal here is to make them comfortable, not for you to learn. So anyway, that's a topic. Some of this is touchy, and I don't know how to approach it very well. If you have advice for me later, I'd love it. Here's a term that I find really useful from sociology. Cultural relativism is the idea that one culture, somebody should be understood in the context of their culture, not in the context of your culture, assuming everybody has the same culture, because that's just not true, especially in the US. A related term is ethnocentricity. We talked about culture versus ethnicity, and this is conflating the two again. I think this is an older term, probably. Belief that your cultural group is superior to another one. That comes up in subtle ways. If you find yourself doing it, just notice and try to improve it. The opposite, I found this term interesting. Xenocentricity is that you find another group preferable to yours. But like the idea of cultural relativism, that multiple cultures exist and they can all be respected in different ways, and you're going to interact with several of them in your workplace probably, I think that's important. All right, so let's say you have a difference in culture with someone on your team. You have one culture and they have another one. 2 minutes? Cool. You can try to understand their culture and help them understand your culture and like dialogue about it. This is assuming that you can both be explicit about it, and that's not always true. A lot of cultures are very implicit. I don't know what to do with those. It's really hard to like iterate and talk through something you can't talk through. If you have thoughts on that or any articles, send them my way. I'd love to know more. If you can analyze the norms together explicitly, that's really useful. And ideally, you meet in the middle. If somebody joins your team, they're not expected to like assimilate and become your culture. They're adding to your culture, and it's changing. Norms and regulation. No, give me a sec. I want to make sure I hit the most interesting last 2 minutes. All right, speech patterns. Oh, a lot of you probably have thought before, I use the word just too much, or should. I have an idea, I haven't tried it yet, but you can maybe use Slack keywords for those. So if you notice yourself using the word just or should, you can stop yourself. Usually these are not so helpful because they're overgeneralizing. They're like hiding details and assuming the other person should know it, and if you don't, they should feel bad. Sometimes that's the effect it has. Negation I've seen a lot in the workplace. So I'll say, I like A. And some coworker will say, I hate A, I like B. And that kind of negates my viewpoint. It kind of stomps on me, makes me feel bad a little maybe. They could have said, OK, you like A, I like B. And that's less negating. Judginess is a big phenomenon. This was my typo earlier, pudginess. Everyone's concerned that people are judging them. That's like generally true. Everybody, even extroverts, have that concern sometimes. If you're 100% joking about being judgy, that's a good joke. That's fine. If it's 100% not joking, you're probably regulating the norm. Like, you didn't wear a seatbelt. Why didn't you wear a seatbelt? Like, that's for their health. I think that's probably good. If it's in the middle, that's kind of uncanny. Maybe you don't even know what you meant, or maybe the person is going to interpret it in a fuzzy way. If you find yourself doing that by accident, I suggest saying, sorry, I don't know what I meant. That wasn't very clear. What I actually meant was, and then say it again more accurately. Cool. What else do I have? I'm going forward to an outro. You have some homework. I referred to a lot of things so that you can get more in depth on a lot of these topics. This is an image of the link that I'm sending to you all. If this helps you, I'd love to hear from you later. Email or Twitter or something. Just send a message my way. It really helps me keep giving this presentation when I know it has a positive impact on people. And if you want to talk to me, you can go on DC Tech Slack. I'm always on there. I'm also in the co-working channel a lot. You could go work with me in a coffee shop if you're allowed to work remotely. I think some people are. That's it. Thank you.